Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name's Anna Dakey and I'm the Director, Counsellor and Speaker at Journeys, and here with me today is Chris Mann, who is the Director of Lifelong Leaders and Pastor at Mawson Lakes Community Church. It's great to have you with me today, Chris. How are you?
Doing very well. Thanks, Anna. Yeah,
Good.
how are you?
I'm doing pretty well too. Yeah, not too bad. So for those of you, if you this might be the first time you've seen us do a video together, welcome. We've been talking about self-care in this crisis situation that we're in, and particularly self-care for leaders. And so today I wanted to ask Chris. So Chris is a guru in leadership and has many years experience as a leader and coaching leaders. And so he's got loads of experience and knowledge and skills in this particular area. So I'm always curious and keen to kind of gain some of his gems around leadership. And one of the things I get curious about is, you know, we're in a crisis. How are leaders different from the average person during a crisis? And what are some things that are important for us to know, Chris, when we think about ourselves as a leader? And should we have different expectations on ourselves, or like how are we as leaders different to the average person during these kinds of times?
That's a huge question.
It is.
And thank you for it. To start off with answering that, there's a lot of, I guess, misconception around leadership, and there are cliches that get used that I think are not properly understood. But the first thing I would say for that is every single person watching this video, whether they consider themselves a leader or not, has influence. And I think all leaders are meant to be servant leaders. And I think every person on the planet is capable of what I would call a great life of servant leadership. But that life of servant leadership might not consist of big, great things, but lots of good, small things all together across a lifetime is a great life of servant leadership. And everyone needs to know that they are capable of being a great servant leader if that is what they choose to do. That people can choose not to be a servant, and people can choose not to be a leader, and people can choose not to be a servant leader. But there is so much joy in being a servant leader that I would encourage it for anyone and everyone who is looking for joy in their life and looking for meaning and purpose. So that would be the first thing that I'd say. However, leaders have a disproportionate influence in life in general compared to the regular person in the street, and especially in a crisis, leaders are given even more opportunity to make a difference, either positively or negatively. And the thing about, for lots of leaders, and particularly when I started as a leader, I was given a greater opportunity, but I didn't necessarily earn it or deserve it or know what to do with it. So there are lots of people in the world who they're given a title of a leader because they were good somewhere else, or because they've got a degree or whatever it happens to be. But they hadn't actually led anything or led anyone well before. So that you can have leaders that are good at leading and good servant leaders, but you can have leaders who are very bad at it. I think leaders, the first thing that they need to understand in a time like this is that they have a responsibility, and that they carry more responsibility. Leadership's not about the rights or the privileges that you get as a leader, but leadership is primarily about responsibility, and not your responsibility for other people, but your responsibility to other people to do your best for other people. So that's the first thing.
Sorry, I'm curious about that. So what's the difference between responsibility for someone and responsibility to someone as a leader?
So a leader is, I think, responsible to do their best for the sake of others, but they cannot hold themselves responsibility for what other people do with what they've done for them.
Right.
And so we carry the responsibility to do our best, but we aren't to carry them. And if you can carry a person for, it's like physically, you can carry a person for a short period of time, depending on your physical strength and depending on the size of the person. But you can't carry them for your entire life. You can't carry them for a week physically. Same with as a leader, but you can teach them you can teach that person how to walk by themselves like you would with a child. You can teach them how to walk, you can teach them how to do things. You're responsible to do those things,
right?
But you're not responsible to carry them. And often leaders, particularly in my area, the church, we consider ourselves responsible for people, and we end up trying to carry them and carry a weight that's not ours to carry. And in the end, it's Jesus' weight to carry in the church.
Yeah.
But we are responsible to do our best. Does that make?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Wonderful. So leaders need to understand that responsibility, and then as part of that responsibility to people is that people look to leaders, rightly or wrongly, and people can argue whether that's right or wrong, but I think it's right. People look to leaders for guidance, and that means leaders need to be able to see what's coming. So I mentioned in a previous video that I've got a community of pastors that I get support from. They saw things coming with this coronavirus that I did not see early on. And so they led me, and they said to me and in our circle of friends, you know, Chris and guys, because they're all men, they're all boys, males, whatever. They're like, guys, this is what I see. One of them was saying, Chris, this is what's going on, and you need to respond, and I don't think you're ready. And so in that situation, they were my eyes. They saw what I didn't see, which then meant that I could pass on to others what had been passed on to me, and then go and do the work to see for myself. So they need to see more than what other people see about what's going on and what the future might look like, and they need to see it before so that they can help other people and provide reassurance. And that's what's really important in this, seeing more of what's going on and seeing before. And that takes work on the part of the leader, but the benefit for their followers or the people that they serve is that they can provide then a sense of certainty and security that wouldn't otherwise be possible. And that's one of the responsibilities, I think, of a leader, and how a leader is to be different. And that means doing work that others won't do. So just as an example, I see people posting on Facebook and things about, and I get on Facebook and have a look, and about they've just watched 3 seasons of whatever show on Netflix, or they've got nothing left to watch on Netflix because they've watched everything. I'm like, how do you even do that? Because we don't have the time, and in part because of my responsibilities, and that so a leader can't isolate and binge on Netflix unless they need to do that to care for themselves, of course. But there are choices that a leader has to make, especially during a crisis.
Yeah. And I think too, with that, there's choices that they have to make. Something I was saying to someone the other day is that there'll be certain choices you need to make for a time because of this situation. So it might be that you feel like you are working more hours when you've spent a lot of time trying not to do that, or trying to have more balance or whatever. But being able to look at it as this is for a time that, you know it will end. We don't know when yet, but it will end in the intensity that it's at the moment. And so, if you want to binge on things, well, you might need to wait until life goes back to some level of routine and new normal or whatever. So yeah.
And so as part of that, that's part of that big picture time, that this is for a time, and that leaders have a responsibility to, I think, always look big picture, especially at a time like this. They need to look into the future, but they also need to look at their wider community and caring for that wider community as best they possibly can. Whereas if you're not a leader, you don't think about your wider community as much. And that can be an indicator for people as to whether they've got leadership potential in them, is are they thinking about their wider community or what they can do for their wider community? more than just their immediate circle or the one person at a time. A leader is thinking of 5 or 10 or 30 or 50 or 100 or thousands or millions, depending on the responsibility they've been given by God. That's what they're thinking about when they're thinking big picture. So I see leaders being different in terms of seeing the big picture and making things better for the people that they serve. That's their primary responsibility, is making things better. The last thing I would say, and there's much more I could say, but I'll keep it to this. The last thing that I would say what's different for a leader is that they need to understand that there is going to be a tension, and they have to manage an internal tension that I find personally very difficult to manage. And that's the tension of the fact that they have to pay a price, as you just said, that there is a price to pay as a leader, especially as at a time like this. And that could mean short-term more hours. It could mean short-term more stress. It could mean, for some leaders, it's giving up money that they had planned on and taking a pay cut in order to care for the staff or the volunteers or whoever that they're linked with. There's a price to pay. If you're a leader and not willing to pay a price at some point, then you're not a good leader, quite frank. You have to be willing to pay a price. But then you also have to manage, and this is where the tension is, you also have to take care of yourself. And there's always this uncomfortable tension, and they seem like they're at loggerheads, and perhaps they are, but I think they're necessary to be working that tension, because that tension will give a leader good energy to have, okay, there's a price now, I'm going to take care of myself, and then work back to the price and use that as energy to do each thing well, rather than be lazy about either option or unintentional is perhaps a better word. It provides that intentionality about paying the price and the intentionality about resting and taking care of themselves. And a leader has to manage that tension in a way that someone who isn't a leader and isn't responsible for themselves, they don't even need to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, that kind of comes back to something we talked about in a previous video around getting the support that you need as a leader. Maybe it's kind of like, I don't know what to do with this tension. I need to debrief it and work out what and what's the level of tension that I'm okay with, right? So you've got the responsibilities as a leader. You've also got the challenge of, well, I actually want to look after myself. How do I make sense of that tension? And sometimes during a crisis is when we learn a lot about ourselves that we didn't realize was sitting there, right? Some things come to light, and that might be, I can't handle the tension. Therefore, okay, well then what decisions do you need to make in order to deal with that tension? So that you can deal with the tension to the best of your ability to be able to look after yourself and others.
Yeah. Yeah. And so on that, a leader has two options really. They can, if the tension's too high, they can reduce it, which means reducing actually in the end their level of responsibility. It might be just their internal sense of responsibility that might need to go down to a more healthy level. It might be an unrealistic level of responsibility they've placed on themselves. So they can reduce the tension. If it's long term, they might need to really reduce and actually end up with less responsibility in life. And sometimes that's needed, especially when people burn out. That's actually what's needed, because the tension got too high. But just for lots of leaders, if it's worth them knowing, if they choose to reduce only one side of that ledger, either way, they will end up not leading. If they say, look, I'm not even going to pay attention to the tension I feel about taking care of myself, and I'm just going to pay the price, they will destroy themselves internally and lose the ability to lead as a result. If they choose to not pay any price and only take care of themselves, someone will remove them from their position of leadership, because they're not willing to pay a price anymore.
Yeah, that's great. Love that. Go. Good information, Chris. I knew you were the guru.
very kind words, but thank you.
Thank you, really. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for sharing your your knowledge and your experiences and explaining some of those concepts in a way that makes sense to me. So hopefully the leaders and everybody who's watching this has been able to get something out of it. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Anna.